Hello and welcome to my statistics final project presentation. I am Magdalene Sapunetri and I will be presenting on the topic, Does smoking habits influence one's depression levels in the USA? I shall set the ball rolling with a topic of interest, which is the impact of smoking on depression. On to our literature reviews. The first one is from the paper Depression, Anxiety and COPD, the unexamined role of nicotine dependence. In this, Godwin et al. Say these findings provide initial evidence suggesting that there is association between anxiety, depression and COPD, may be at least partly attributable to confounding by cigarette smoking and nicotine dependence. The second is from the paper Depressive Symptoms Among Heavy Cigarette Smokers, the Influence of Daily Rate, Gender and Race. In this, it says that smokers reported a higher, clinically meaningful level of depressive symptoms relative to non-smokers. Furthermore, daily amount of intake was inversely associated with self-reports of depressive symptoms. The last literature review says smoking is a known risk factor for depression and some of the anxiety disorders. A young age at smoking onset is associated with a shorter time to first onset of anxiety disorder. These papers help perpetuate that there is a link between smoking and depression. This therefore leads to us formulating a research question and its association. The question at hand is, does one's smoking status affect how depressed they are? And the association being tested here is that, is there an association between smoking status and frequency of depressive thoughts? In terms of sampling, the data set used was IPUMS NHIS 2020, with the country of focus being the United States of America. The sample size was approximately 36,000 people in over 35,000 households all over the United States of America. Multi-stage sampling was used for this process. This involves 4 steps in which the US population was divided geographically and then into 2 stratas for some states. Next was defining clusters within the stratons and finally systematically selecting a specific number of address clusters to be used for this data set. This dataset was subsetted by the variable age. In this, the data of people between the ages of 15 and 40 was used. Upon measures, there were 2 variables used for this research. The first is frequency of smoking. In this, we had 3 categories: those who smoke every day, those who smoke some days, and those who do not smoke at all. The next variable, which was the response variable, was frequency of depressive thoughts. In this, we had 5 tiers: daily depressive thoughts, weekly depressive thoughts, monthly depressive thoughts, a few times a year, and those who never have depressive thoughts. In terms of inferential testing, I used a chi-square test of independence to test the association with a confidence interval of 95%. My explanatory variable was smoking habit, which is categorical, and my response variable, which is depression, was also categorical, hence the use of the chi-square test. The null hypothesis is there is no association between one's smoking habits and the frequency of their depressive thoughts, with the alternative hypothesis being that there is an association between one's smoking habits and the frequency of their depressive thoughts. On to the results. The sample size of the explanatory variable, which is smoking habits, totaled to 9,554 observations, with smoking every day taking 3,343 observations, smoking some day having 1,488 observations, and do not smoke at all having 4,723 observations. Per the results from this bivariate graph, which compares the proportion of frequency of depressive thoughts by frequency of smoking, one can infer that the highest proportion of people who never have depressive thoughts are those who do not smoke at all, with the lowest being from those who smoke every day. In reverse, those who have the highest proportion of daily depressive thoughts happen to be those who smoke every day, followed by those who smoke some days, and then, lastly, those who do not smoke at all. With a degree of freedom of 8 and a p-square value of 0.003766, which is less than our margin of error, which is 0.05. We therefore reject the null hypothesis. The data supports the claim that there is an association between one's smoking habits and their frequency of depressive thoughts. A type 1 error could have been made since we rejected the null hypothesis. I decided to moderate this dataset with gender. This is because I believe that gender could be a lurking variable in this research. From my moderation, as can see in the chart, females across the three categories of the explanatory variable, which is smoking habits, have a larger proportion of depressive thoughts than males. This is because more men across all three categories reported to have never had depressive thoughts or had depressive thoughts just a few times a year. A larger proportion of females reported to have daily, weekly, and even monthly depressive thoughts. Conclusively, it can be said that smoking and depression may be linked, and nicotine dependence may account for this result. This can be inferred from the reading Depression, Anxiety, and CODP, the unexamined role of nicotine dependence, in which the authors discuss the role of nicotine in depression. Causal mechanisms may include eating and drinking habits, which could be lurking variables in this research. The limitation of this research, however, is that this research pertains only to the USA, as the data sets an American survey. This means that the conclusions drawn from this research cannot be used to generalize the worldwide scale of the link between smoking and depression. Further research should be conducted to fully understand the association between smoking and depression. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.